privilege to be with you today to deliver this message. If you don't know me or know what I do in my other life when I'm not here on Sundays, I am a life coach, and I also do a One Human show, which is a recent manifestation in my life. So you may know me from my work, Lean Inside. I have a book called Lean Inside, 7 Steps to Personal Power. Last week, Sharon Dwyer gave us a beautiful description of the book, The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. One of the things that Sharon pointed out is that all the spiritual teachers are essentially saying the same thing, right? And so my book, Lean Inside, is my version of what I call, the work, right? The work that we talk about. And every Sunday, we come in here and we affirm that there's only one presence and one power in the universe. That's God the Good, and that includes me, right? Because if it's everywhere, then it has to be part of me. And so my work, Lean Inside, this is my version. Last week you heard Michael Singer's version. This is my version of that work. But what I want you to know is that this part over here, this gender reveal party, that's comedy. It's stand-up, it's storytelling, and it's me being more vulnerable than I have ever been in my life in front of people. And I want you to know that this is absolutely impossible, not able to happen without this work. I had to get to a place where I could love myself and listen to myself strongly enough to be able to have this come through me, because this is my most divine expression. It's what I wanted to be when I grew up. It's that part of me that's so tenderoni I couldn't even tell anybody about it until it was almost done, because it's so vulnerable and so tender for me. But I'm telling you that the only way that I've been able to access this part of me is through the Lean Inside work, or through this work, and that's a knowing, right? That knowing and stepping into myself and listening to myself. So in my work, I call what in Unity we call the Christ consciousness. We call it, the I am, the all that we are. In my work, I call that yourself. And I came up with that acronym because I wanted people to have access to this work who weren't going to go into a church, who weren't necessarily going to go into a spiritual community. But I wanted them to have access to this other, what I say is who you are, right? And so one day I'm thinking about this, who is yourself? And I had this download, and I just wrote down spiritually evolved, loving friend. So if yourself is spiritually evolved, according to Cindy Wigglesworth in SQ21 about spiritual intelligence, spiritual evolvement is acting with wisdom and compassion at all times. Boy, I wish I could do that. And not happening most of the time. And what I know is that when I anchor myself in that part of me, that knowing part of me, there is a part of me that is that. And in Unity, we often I like to refer to Butterworth's work, where he talks about God as the ocean, and we are the wave. And that part of you cannot be separate from that wave. And for me to be a wave, to be that full-on expression, that part of me is what comes through, that spiritual involvement and the lovingness and the friendship, the kindness that comes forth. Now, the other piece that often in Unity we call the ego, or we call it the monkey mind, in my work, we call it small. Small. And one of the goals, obviously, is to be able to watch your small. That's the first practice. And in The Untethered Soul, Michael Singer talks about that as being the witness. Ram Dass, be the witness. All the spiritual, we're talking about the same thing all the time, right? So the goal, obviously, is to start to watch that small. So in my work, one of the ways I have people do that is I start having them create an acronym for their small. In other words, when you're in your small, or your monkey brain, what does that sound like? What does that thing sound like? You have to get familiar with what the noise sounds like so you can start to go, oh, that's happening. So over the time that I've done seminars and workshops, I pulled together people's versions of their small, and they look like this. Small, superficial, silent, sarcastic, snarky, self-absorbed, stressed, stubborn, secluded, shallow, scared, smart-ass, silly, standoffish, snappy, scarce, scarcity-minded. Any of that, resonate with any of you? Uh-oh, there we go. M, mouthy. That's me. When small's in charge, my mouth, I have to, right? Mad, manipulative, mean, melancholy. These are just ways of being and how it shows up when small's in charge. Angry. Avoiding, absent, agreeable, right? How many have your small in charge and you don't get angry, you get agreeable? You people please. It's still not authentic. It's not who you are. It's a version of small. Loud, lazy, lethargic, late. Looking for a fight. That was me too. Last L, living in the past, lame. So we do this exercise because I want you to know what small sounds like for you. But more importantly, what's important to me is to make things very practical and as logical as possible. Because I feel like we have way too much fluff out there. We've got to just narrow it down to practice. And I'm good at practicing, and I'm good at making things logical for people. I'm a 9 on the logic scale. I'm practically Spock. So I need things to make sense to me, okay? So that being said, then what are the source or the origin of small or self? I'm going to have my kids come up, invite my children up here to help me with this piece of it. So on one side we have small, and then we have yourself. So first of all, what would you assert, right, those of you who are in the audience, what would you assert are the origins of small and self? Any thoughts from the audience? Ego, okay. So ego comes from which side? Small, you said? Okay. So I would assert, and this is why I want to break it down to be as simple as possible, that small is 100% coming from your human parts. There is nothing divine about small. It is nothing but your brain and the synapses that you have created over time, right, to survive, usually fear, some kind of survival, and this is how it shows up. But this is wiring, right? This is all wiring. And it doesn't matter whether you had a long, delicious childhood or whether you had to survive something. It doesn't matter. You wired yourself up to survive. And how this works is, we know this. We know enough about neuroscience to know that these patterns run and they run and they run, and the more we focus on them, the more that we pay attention, the more they run together, and neurons that wire together fire together, and they create patterns that are real and then help you create your life. So that's the origin of small, is really biological. It's coming from your brain. Now, would you go to your brain for advice? Would you? Would you go to your brain for financial advice? Would you go to your small for advice? No. We would not do that. So let's flip it, because now small has a particular sound sometimes too. So once you get familiar with this, Emma, what does small sound like? There you go. Right? So when we can identify, wait, do it again. Do it again. There you go. We know small, it's small. All right, so now, what would you suppose is the source of self? Did you say heart? Somebody said heart? Some might call it love, right? Some might call it love. Divinity, we could call it divinity.
Infinity.
We can call it whatever you want, but I want to make it so basic, right? So basic that is unarguable, all right? So I want to make it so that, for today anyway, what we're talking about is life force. Because there's only one thing that you truly know about life force, and that's when it's gone, you're dead. right? I mean, you all can propose things and we can say we believe things, but the truth is that what we know about life force is when it's gone, you're dead. So if we think of this as just life force for a minute, then it doesn't have an opinion, it doesn't have any thoughts. It's just a force. Now, what I know and what I would assert all of you metaphysicians know, and you truth students know, and what spiritual teachers have told us forever, and what it feels like is that when we get into the self, when we are devoting our time to ourself, it does feel good, does it not? So we can agree that it feels good. So I'm going to assert that self and the origin of self, if nothing else, is well-being. I got it sticker backwards. Well-being. There we go. Is well-being. So here's the practice. This feels good. Does this feel good? No, very clear, right? You guys did a great job. Would you all give my kids some love? Come up here. Thank you so much. Come on. There they go. And I want you to notice that while small has stuff to say, self doesn't say anything. Because, I mean, you can, even things like I love you, that's still coming from over here. It's still training. This is a knowing. It's not a feeling at you. It's a knowing, right? And there's a big distinction between a knowing and an opinion. And so if you ask yourself something and you hear an opinion, guess where it's coming from? Right? But when you have a knowing, right, you feel a pull towards something. That's what this is, because this is energy, right? And if nothing else, it's life force and it makes you feel good. So here's the cool thing, is that I think that one of the best things we can do for people is teach them to practice. Because what we know, and we know this about the brain, is that if you practice enough, you can train that thing to do anything. And the first time when you start to practice, it doesn't feel good. And just like working out in a gym, you go to a gym and you work out. If you haven't worked out in a while, you're going to have some sore muscles. I've gone to the gym after not being there for a while and done a bunch of squats, and the next day I can't walk. I'm like, oh my God, right? It hurts so bad. When you start doing this kind of work, the muscles and the sore muscles show up as stress, extra chatter in the brain sometimes, a little, feelings, stuff you have to deal with. It comes up, right? But what happens if you just have those sore muscles and then you go, then I quit, right? Then you never actually get the result. And so what it takes to be a metaphysician and to stay as centered as possible in the self is practice. It takes practice. And it takes more than just coming here on Sundays and sitting here. You have to actually go home and practice. And so I'm going to give you a couple of practices today that I hope will actually make a difference for you. The first practice is this idea that if you can identify a thought that is coming from a thought comes, and then it doesn't feel good, right? Doesn't feel good to you, you know it's coming from small, right? And so therefore you can say, well, that doesn't feel good, and I don't want to have that thought. I can think something else, right? Like when we're angry and we have thoughts like, I hate my family. That doesn't feel good, right? And so that's not the truth. But boy, it seems like it is at the time, right? And that's because your cortisol is high and you're pumping, and that's all about brain stuff. That's all chemistry. It's all the chemistry. The practice is being able to watch that. When you can watch yourself do that, the first time you start to watch, it just seems weird and I don't know what's happening, but the more you flex that muscle, the more you can intervene and say things like, well, that doesn't feel good. I'm not going to think that thought. Or is that something I believe and then I need to upgrade that thought, right? And all my work is about how to upgrade those thoughts, right? Take a different step in the dance, make it different. What humans do, though, is we have small come up, right? And then we attack it with more small. Right? We say, go away, get out of here, right? And we're mad, we're mean to our small. We say, I hate you, don't do that, right? And let me tell you, that causes resistance. And if you're a metaphysician, you know that what you resist persists, right? So that will have that part of small coming at you stronger. So when I first, last year, if you know I'm a transgender person, I was born female, went on testosterone. Last year I went off. Last year I took my last shot of testosterone last July. And instead of some of the thoughts that I used to have with my man brain, all I had was comedy, downloading comedy, right? And I know that this, and so how it shows up at first is from my small. Like, you need to do comedy. You can do comedy. And running comedy in my head constantly. When I attack it with small, like, shut up, I'm not dealing with that. I'd already tried that. I'm not doing that. Then all it did was come stronger at me. Because sometimes the fear is the fear of your own greatness. Sometimes the fear is the fear of your own greatness. And when you attack it with more fear and more small, it just gets more pitiful and more small and keeps coming at you. So finally I started listening to my small from myself. And I just came with kindness, and I just said I'm going to listen. And then I made a promise that I would just try it. Just try. Just try to do it one time. So I found somebody to listen to me. And I made him come to a garage, and I stood up. I did an hour and a half worth of comedy and stuff. And then he's a guy I trust in the theater, and he's funny. He writes comedy. And he told me it was worth taking another step. So I listened, and I promised my small self and my inner child, all that stuff, that I would do it again. This is the most vulnerable stuff I can do for me. You know why? Because I want it so much. And every single one of you has a tenderness in you that if you have cut it off, it is the piece of you that you draw the line on your lovability. When I say lovability, I want you to get that. I mean lovability. Ability to love and ability to love yourself, which is why we're here. I am so profoundly clear and have such a deep knowing that our only job here is to figure out how to love ourselves and love every single part of it. And not a knowing and a loving like, oh, I love you so much, but knowing and a loving like I love myself, like I love my family, like, yeah, I'm an ass sometimes, and I'll put up with that because I love you, because I want you to be in my life. And what was always in the way, right, always in the way, are those tender parts that you don't want anybody to know about, that you don't want anybody else to see. And that's where small will come and smack you in the head. But it is a practice to learn to listen and discover potentially what might be in the way of your own love ability, your own ability to love and love yourself, most importantly. Now, so the practice that I want you to practice is when you have a thought, you think, does that feel good? No, it doesn't feel good. But it's coming from my small, right? And I can either choose another thought or I can get my explorer's hat on what's going on there. Maybe I got some stuff to deal with and root out that I still haven't dealt with yet. I don't know. But it could be just chatter, because it just does that. It's just a mechanism. This is a knowing. Your higher self is something to just be with and listen. And when you do, you're going to have nudges. You're going to want to do things. My request is that you allow yourself, in baby steps, to have it and to allow yourself to do it. Now, what I love about Unity is they do give us practices here. And one of the ways that to flex your muscle in accessing your higher self is to learn how to meditate and pray. And we say at Unity that that's how we connect with our divine, is through prayer and meditation. And once you know it, that they actually have a process. They do. They have a process. And if you don't have a card, we handed them out when you came in. Will you raise your hand? Our ushers will get you one. You should have one. And I want to extend an additional thank you and gratitude to Kathy Moreland, as always, because Kathy made these cards for you. Yeah. We got one more up here, Ann, for John, and then, these got three here. Okay, good. Oh, sorry. You got three behind you. You got one up here. Virginia needs one up here. Okay, so I want to just review this, and I want you to have this card because the other practice I want you to take on, if you don't already meditate and pray or you don't even connect up, now you have no excuse because you have a formula. So what we're going to do next is we're going to start to go into meditation, but we're going to do it through using the five-step process, right? So we're going to practice right now. Isn't that something? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get you into relaxing and just relaxing, and Jessica's going to come up and sing you into meditation. Now, one of my requests is if you can't close your eyes, then great, that's fine. But I'm going to request that you put both feet on the floor and that you close your eyes and that you take a few deep breaths and see if you can start to relax your entire body. To see how much, just in the time that Jessica's singing, you can relax. Now, one of the things I want you to also, if you can, focus on is Jessica singing to you. One of the ways that, if you haven't figured out by now, that Jessica Pryor shines her light is through being in front of you. There's a light that comes through her when she sings that if you hook into it, I promise you, you're going to have a different experience than if you don't. She really takes her music seriously when she performs for you. She is the words, and so if you really listen and be with her, I promise you're going to have a different experience. I'm going to invite you to do that. So, and afterwards, don't clap because we're going into meditation, okay? So we're going to go straight into meditation. It's not the way we usually do it, but we're going to do it here. Go straight into meditation. And Emmett's going to go to sleep, okay? So here we go. Feet on the floor. Close your eyes and start relaxing your body. You can start at your toes if you want to. You can squeeze them up and then relax. And the whole goal is just to relax and be with Jessica and Holly.
I breathe out, I breathe in, I am still, I go within. When I quiet my mind, in the stillness I find, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there. When I let go of my control, I find what truly satisfies my soul. When I quiet my mind, in the stillness I find, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there. Spirit hears and answers every single prayer. Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there. In the stillness, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there. Spirit hears and answers every single prayer. Spirit meets me there, Spirit meets me there. In the stillness, Spirit meets me there. Ooh. stillness, Spirit meets me there.
If you're not already relaxed, take a moment. Just relax in the chair. Know you're safe. I want you to take your focus inside now. Part of the most important process of this is being able to keep your heart open. As humans, we don't easily do that, especially when we're committed to being right about something. We could be right that we're not good enough, that we're unlovable. And when we're committed that we're right, that we're unlovable, or those things, it's the hardest time to open our hearts. I'm going to invite you to do that, though. I'm going to invite you to open your heart like a shutter. And see if you can keep it open. Keep your focus there on being open-hearted. We're going to focus in on being love-able, lovable. If you can just be as still as you possibly can. And then get present to that inner space. And start to be the one that's watching. As we sit here for a moment, we stay focused as much as possible. Potentially you may need a mantra. And I would invite you to create the mantra, I am lovable. I am able to love. I am lovable. And then anytime your brain goes to another thought, bring it back. I'm going to invite you to be there in that space and just allow. Watch and allow as we be there in the silence. Before we come out of the silence, I want to invite you to give yourself some gratitude, some love, some acknowledgement for being here today, for being still for a moment, for being willing to practice. And before you go, if you're willing, maybe make a baby step commitment that you'll come back, that you'll practice. Being lovable, being able to love, being willing to be the kindness, the love, the well-being Start to wiggle your toes. Come back. Be back in this room. Everything I teach is a practice. You should come back and here, be with me. You're so beautiful after you meditate. Colors flying. So thank you for allowing me to be with you today, and I hope that what you take away most is the practice and the willingness to keep practicing and keep being kind to yourself as you practice. And most of what that takes is a willingness to stop, right? And to breathe and to ask to see it differently with your heart open. Sharon's doing a study on the untethered soul. I hope that you'll participate in that. We're talking about the same principles here. But the more you flex that muscle, being able to watch that, the more power you have. And the more you are able to really create your life exactly the way you want it to. And I'm telling you this because I live a blessed life. And I am everything I ever dreamed of being at this point. There's nothing I don't dream of being that I don't go take baby steps to be. And the only way that I have that power is through this kind of work. And it's through that kind of connection. So thank you for being here. And I hope you practice all week. I love you.